Have you ever felt you're drowning? I know on campus we have so many heart-wrenching situations that take place. Discouragement, disappointment happens all the time. I'm a father, and my youngest son was bullied constantly in high school. Even though he was an athlete, he was small for his size and constantly found that discouragement and disappointment taking place in his life. The question comes, what do you do when you get down? And I know that we have so many of our students on our campuses that are pulled apart by that disappointment, pain, discouragement. In my home state, I have a young gal, her name's Angelina, that struggles daily with pain in her life. She's into self-harm. And the conversations that we've had over the years have been such that she's always processing how to get through those times. I've been able to, through the years, because I'm a daddy, come alongside and actually give her daddy hugs and step into that picture with her and help her through some of those darkest times. But the hard part is what do you do and what brings them on? So I'm going to give you 4 different reasons why we get discouraged, why we are disappointed. Job was a man that went through great disappointment and great discouragement. To be honest, it's because his wife and his friends turned on him. We often see this on the school campus, where our friends are one day they're our friends and the next day they're not, because of circumstances that have happened, because of reasons that are unknown to most of us, that backstory that we just don't know. The heartache that came to Job during that time was such that many of his friends told him to turn away from God, to curse God and die. The greatest part about Job is he had staying power. Next, Elijah. He felt discouraged. He was a man of prayer and he was a man of action. Because of the great miracles that he had seen take place in his life and in the surrounding area, he believed that that would change the people that he was ministering to. But the people he was ministering to became stubborn. They didn't want to have anything to do with what he was saying. And because of that, discouragement and disappointment came into his life, and we find Elijah running to the desert, crying out to God, "What am I supposed to do?" Again, in that deepest, darkest place, his friends turned on him. There was no one left. In fact, he got to the place where he believed he was the only one that believed in God. Our third Old Testament character is Jeremiah. In Lamentations 3, it talks about how Jeremiah lost all hope. He even lost hope in God. And again, as we become discouraged and disappointed, we find those times where we are down and out. And it's during those times that when we are the most down, God's actually right next to us, walking us through the valley of the shadow of death. I remember it was a few years ago, even one of my own kids went through a situation where life was out of control. My own child had walked into a place where she shouldn't have. And I remember God speaking to me that he was walking right next to me, that he'd walk me through the valley of the shadow of death. But it took about 1.5 years to come out of that discouragement and that disappointment. The goal here is not to remain where we've been, not to camp in the valley, but to get out of the valley by trusting God. Lastly, we find the story of Peter in the book of Matthew. During that time, he was obviously this huge, amazing disciple, but one of the greatest fallouts that any disciple had was this man named Peter. Peter was always encouraged, always strong. He was always this man that everybody believed could do the impossible, and yet oftentimes he found himself failing miserably. One of my favorite stories of Peter was later on in his life. Jesus had just died, and now we're finding Peter back on the boat fishing again like he did as a young man. But in this moment, Jesus showed up. He walked up to Peter after Resurrection Day, and he said these words, "Peter, do you love me?" I think that's the coolest thing about our Jesus, is that he looks beyond what we've done on the outward appearance, and he looks at the heart of the man, and he understands the backstory of the man, and he comes right at him. And in this moment, that discouragement turned into a great man of God that did so many things in his future. In fact, one of the greatest stories we know was the day of Pentecost, when Peter got up with courage and faith and preached a message, and thousands were saved. That's what happens when we turn discouragement into courage. Lastly, I want to discuss with you the 5 steps that it'll take when discouragement begins to swallow you alive and life is spiraling out of control. The first thing you've got to do is understand that you've got to be honest with yourself. If you're not honest with yourself, then you can't be helped. The honesty comes by admitting that you're discouraged, that you're down, that you've got problems and issues. Yes, it'd be great to find people that'll come alongside you, but the first step is to be honest with yourself. In fact, if things get bad, take care of yourself because you can't allow your physical being to be tortured. You got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to have good friends around you, people that'll encourage you, people that'll stand with you, people that'll pray with you. Talk to your youth pastor, talk to your youth pastor's wife. Don't carry this load by yourself when you're discouraged and down. Thirdly, take care of your thought pattern. You know, the Bible tells us in Philippians that we're to take every thought captive. We need to put it where it belongs. I know as a young man or a young woman, it's difficult because we allow those types of things to take control of us. But if we become intentional about the way that we're living our lives and put into perspective what these things mean for our future, obviously we can take a step back and look in a very healthy way at the discouragement that's happening in our lives. How will this affect me? How will this define me in my future? Will I allow this to form a place in my life that will affect me eternally? Or will I put it back in the place where it belongs? That it's just a moment of time, a brief space, and in the future it'll be gone. Fourthly, we've got to look at how we're transforming our minds. Romans tells us that needs to take place. We need to do it in 2 different perspectives. First, life is hard. But secondly, we've got to see that God has an eternal purpose behind what's going on. He just doesn't allow these things to happen in our lives so that we walk away wondering what God's purpose is. He absolutely has a purpose. And the best part of it is God's purpose is always for your good. Lastly, you got to press into God. I know that at this time it's a discipline. It's not necessarily easy to do unless it's a part of who you are. But it's during these times as we're walking through the valley that God says, come close to me and I'll draw near to you. It's during these times that God walks right beside us. It's during these times that we grow the most. It's during these times that discouragement is no longer there. Disappointment is no longer there. In fact, we turn those things into great courage, and we turn those things, that disappointment, into divine appointments where God's in control. And the outcome is not only will your life be stronger, but everybody around you will grow because they will have seen you come out of the valley into the light. In closing, guys, you're campus missionaries. The hard part is as you look at yourself, you may not see these flaws that take place in your life, but these flaws are a part of who we are in Christ. In fact, it may be our best journey to help others find Christ during this time as campus missionaries. Because truth be told, if we were perfect, we'd have no way to impact the lives of others. But because we're imperfect and we do go through valleys and life does hurt, when we come out of that, it's our greatest testimony. It's our greatest way into the lives of those that are around us because they don't expect us to be perfect. And that way we don't expect them to be either.